This podcast is brought to you by Hoare Chartered Accountants. Hoare Chartered Accountants are based in Galway City and are a leading provider of audit, accountancy and taxation services. For more information, visit hoarecharteredaccountants.ie. You're welcome along now to the Maroon and White pod. So we're down to two teams left in the senior and intermediate hurling championships. Thomas's and Loughrea will meet in a repeat of the 2022 county final in the hurling final this year. And weirdly enough, it's the same in the football too. It's a repeated 2022 final, so it's weird the way that has landed in both. In the intermediate final, Kinvara meet Mealich Aircourt and Lee Mellows come out victorious against Ahascragh Fohenagh 216 to 19 points, and they are Senior B hurling champions. I'm joined by John Fallon and Joe Hession to look back on the semi-final action over the weekend. Joe, first off, no major surprises. People could have probably predicted a Thomas's and Loughrea final at the start of the year.
Yeah, no major surprises, Paul. Probably a lot of disappointment out my way. Turrickmore obviously getting pipped again. But I think looking at both games, you'd say that the two best teams won on the night. Certainly no arguments that side. And both teams probably shown a lot of improvement from the quarterfinals. So maybe Crowell and Turrick didn't show that level of improvement. And obviously, the two teams that deserve to be in the final have made it through.
Yeah, John, I think even if you look at this, I suppose with Loughrea, they wanted to back it up, wanted to, I suppose, remind people that this wouldn't be a fluke, and there's always that, I suppose, pressure when you win that one. But Loughrea are backing it up, and Thomas's is ever hungry for more.
Yeah, I think we said it as well, Paul, a few months ago when we were trying to predict the outcome of this. And once you win it, it's you get that winning habit as well from it. And I know, like Joe saying, the likes of Thurlockmore, likes of Clarendon Bridge, Capitagal, there's teams there that just have been so close in recent years and haven't got over the line. And let's not forget, last year Loughrea went into the county final having lost the previous 5 county finals they were in. Um, some, if not all, that would have felt they were in with a real shout to win it. So having won that, and I think we saw particularly in the quarterfinals as well, the Thomases and Loughrea, they were in danger and yet got over the line, knew how to win it, knew how to do it. And that's what sets up potentially great final, because these two teams know how to win, know how to grind it out. Dirty wet evening in Salt Hill, you were fancying them from the outset once you saw the day that was in it, let alone anything else or whatever. And that plus the pressure was off Loughrea to a degree, having gone the whole way last year, and Thomas's having done that many times. So I suppose in the end, no surprise about who won the two of them. But I just sense an awful lot of regret, particularly in Thurlockmore, and maybe less so in Crowell, because I think they'll look back at the year that they actually made a lot of progress in. But knowing how to win and doing it, they both showed that. Only one of them can do it in the final, but that sets it up. It'll be a ding dong affair.
Before we get in and look at the semi-finals, we may as well talk about the elephant in the room, I suppose, at the minute. A lot of discussion among supporters over the last few days since the county final has been fixed. It's 6 o'clock under lights in Pearse Stadium on November 1st between Thomas's and Loughrea. John, I'll get your thoughts first and then Joe can come in. But do you feel this is the correct decision to play the county final under lights in Pearse Stadium?
Um, I think it's an overall thing. For years, we had no facility to stage, particularly inter-county matches under lights, like most other counties do. I know Ballinasloe have lights, but to the degree of holding huge crowds. So, in one sense, Galway is late coming to the whole thing with a county ground that can hold, 20, 30, 20, 25,000 with lights. Everybody, I think, initially sort of presumed this was fine for all the county matches, and maybe the county finals at 3 o'clock in November's afternoon, you can turn on the lights and do that. I don't think people necessarily envisage we would have county football and hurling finals on Saturday nights. But at the same time, Galway County Board are damned if they do and damned if they don't. They need to try out and see, does Saturday night work for county semi-finals and finals? And they may as well do it in the first year of having it, and review it then accordingly with that, rather than keep kicking the can down the road with it. it didn't help last Saturday night that, you wouldn't put the neighbour's dog out in Salt Hill with the weather that was in it. And that's going to get put into the equation. Whereas if that match was in those matches in Athenry, it would have been just as wet. There would have been less cover because the stand only holds a couple of hundred. At least in the likes of Pearse Stadium, it can practically everyone was under cover. It doesn't make for a great atmosphere because there's nobody on the far side of it. So I think, in fairness to County Board, having put that investment into it, they need to go and give it a try and see all of that. The other side of that, though, is it fair, particularly on hurlers, who may have limited experience of playing under floodlights, and particularly playing in likes of championship matches? It's fine. It's a hell of a lot different to playing a university match up and down in the middle of winter in the rain or whatever. When, let's face it, there isn't a county final up for grabs and all that as well. And maybe not have been accustomed to it. The other part, I'm a bit surprised by the 6 o'clock throw-in. 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening. I don't think the match has been televised by TG Cahir. I think it's been streamed, so I'm not sure what the ins and outs of all that are. I live in Salt Hill. I dread having to go the other side of town because you have to you have to allow for an hour in my case just to, whether it's going to Athenry or going to anywhere else. And it's the same for anyone coming into it. It's not an easy venue to get to. 6 o'clock on a Saturday, if people are working. If I was a Thomas's or Loughrea person, I'd have dinner in the middle of the day and get in the car and get over to Salton. It mightn't be raining in 2 weeks' time. But I think in the overall part of it, I don't think you can fault the county board for at least trying it this year. My preference always, particularly for quarterfinals, semi-finals, the Galway Hurling Championship, indeed finals, I love and always have loved over the last 40 years since I started covering games, heading to Athenry, even back in the day when I played. There's a bounce about the pitch. There's a buzz to it. There's a fabulous cauldron atmosphere in it. And I certainly think things like quarterfinals, semi-finals maybe should be looked at in that regard. There's something absolutely magnetic about a Sunday afternoon going to a double header in Athenry. And I'd hate if that was going to be lost, to be quite honest.
Yeah, obviously, Joe, there is something magical about Kenny Park, and even if you go back to last year between Loughrea and Capitagal, the atmosphere and the scenes that day were brilliant. But at the same time, we have had good county finals in Pearse Stadium too. If you look at Thomas's Loughrea, Thomas's and Turlock as well, so there has been some good days in Pearse Stadium too.
Oh yeah, like John, there's merits to both sides. It would be interesting to talk to some of the players that played Saturday evening last. Now that was a tough evening. The first game probably had to deal with the wind. The second game had to deal with rain. Which is a different animal. As well in there. But it would be interesting to get there. Like there has to be a buzz to it. Arriving into the stadium, it's dark. It'll be dark. There'll be, plenty of people in there. Everyone's to stand side. There's an atmosphere. The lights are on. That's a different buzz, a buzz that Thomas and I haven't dealt with before either. So that'll be interesting. But again, I suppose it's all down to like how the players can cope with the lights. John said it not all clubs, like very few clubs have, access to lights of that standard. I know teams would have trained in Loch George and that last year, but that hasn't happened this year. Or maybe get a run out in Ballinasloe or whatnot. But but you flip that over and you say, well, it's the same for both teams. I think once it's safe to do so, which it is, like I suppose the second game, the last night with the rain, I did find that maybe one or two of the Thomas or the Loughrea guys maybe seeing a high ball or something like that. I definitely thought at one stage maybe Paul Hooban got caught with the lights and stuff like that. Now maybe that's just from the stand you think that, but in general I thought the game, the game was 100% under the lights, and you expect that these lights are good enough for intercounty games, so it's not a thing. The other side of it is, and I love Athenry, and I agree with John. Semi-final day in Athenry is just, it's so accessible. You're seeing people maybe from other clubs that you mightn't have seen, and as a player and management, you're meeting people that you come up against, and you're talking going in, and you're having the banter, and if it's your own club, you're the excitement and the nerves and all that. But even as a neutral and the older neutral that likes to go to these matches, they get in early and they leave in the bar, and you know, there's something about Saltail, rightly or wrongly, that turns them off. It probably turned them off last Saturday evening. Now, the streaming does affect that as well. Obviously, people can look out the window and see what's outside and say, well, you know what, now I'll pay my 15, 20 euros and we'll watch it at home, which is brilliant as well. Um, we haven't heard figures from last Saturday evening, but there was a super crowd in there. Again, the rain took away because the terrace, obviously, people moved into the stand. But I suppose going back to the view, like in the stand the last day, there was an awful lot of kids sitting together and sitting with their families, and their view of the game is so much better in the stadium. You know, a child of 12, 13 that's getting into the game that has their heroes out there, the Dahi Burks, the David Burks, the Fintons, all those guys. They can sit down and watch them and see them from afar and really tune into what's going on out there. And that's important. Um, Look, I think I praise the county board. We have a fine facility in there, fine dressing rooms, super pitch. It's in super condition. Stand that can hold so many, keep so many, as John said, less chance of getting wet in there and driving home in the rain, solid wet. But I think, as John said, the first year you got to look at this. I think the seed was sown when they played the semi-finals in there. The talk was they were going to go with the final, but I think the seed was sown. The four teams, this is what could happen, and look at, we won't know till after the final whistle, or when we sit down and talk about it, and it could be a game of the ages, and the lights and the atmosphere at 6 o'clock on a Saturday could add to that. But you have to applaud the board. Like this is it's new. If you stay the same, you won't change. So I think give it a go, sit down and discuss it when the needs be, and judge it from that for the next couple of years then.
Yeah, I think it's really dependent on the weather you get, because if you look at the weather we got for the two football semis, it was a perfect evening, and then obviously last Saturday evening, you just get that weather then, and it obviously doesn't help things there.
But I think as well, Paul, the time of when it's like there's no reason both the football and the hurling finals could easily just be on 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon this year, or at half three if necessary. Now that the lights are there, that wasn't an option a year or two ago. You were starting county finals at half one in the day because there's a threat of extra time and stuff like that as well. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a Saturday evening. But I think, as Joe said as well, I think it's important to go and actually get the views of players and management on this as well. And I think a lot of players will tell you as well that while Athenry is great, the dressing rooms are small, you got to go out through the crowd, you come in through it. There's, let's face it, we all get riled up or whatever. I always thought in Athenry teams going in together, going through the crowd up the hill. It was a recipe for something. Thankfully, nothing major, not in recent times either. But they now have options with the county board. You could just as easily sort of get into a habit where you'd have your semi-finals on a Sunday afternoon in Tuam and the football, in Athenry and the hurling, and it's a given. I'm not surprised. I think county finals should be played in your premier pitch. In this case, it's Pearse Stadium. Now you have the option of playing them in the afternoon or playing them Saturday evening. What dictates it? Is it the size of the gate? Is it what the feedback from players, managers, all of that involved? I don't think either Cropwell or Thurlock would in any way suggest that they didn't win on Saturday because it was played under lights in Pearse Stadium or anything like that. But I think it's important to get the views of players, and that the best facility is being provided for them at that business end of a championship. And I'm sure they will. In fairness, there's a good willingness there to get that feedback from them.
Yeah, I do think maybe with the intermediate final, it could have been a chance to double up and put this as a double header and have the intermediate final as the curtain raiser to the senior final. I think there would be something special about that for the intermediate players, but that's obviously now being fixed for Kenny Park on Sunday, November 2nd, at 2 o'clock, between Kinvara and Mealy Aircourt there. But if we look at the semi-finals first, we'll take a look at Loughrea and Turlockmore first. Joe, obviously a tough one as a Turlockmore man to look back on this one, but 117 to 15 points between Loughrea and Turlockmore. Loughrea coming out on top. It felt like a comfortable 5 point victory, really, for Loughrea. I know Turlock sort of got it back to two, but there was never any stage, unfortunately, for Turlock where Loughrea looked like losing this late on.
Yeah, Paul, unfortunately. Yeah, look, I think the tone was nearly set by Loughrea for me in the first 10 or 15 minutes compared to the quarterfinal. I thought their work rate was through the roof. Their half back line, their midfield, they probably dominated that area. They put in the hard graft. But I think Turlock would have been quite happy probably with 20 minutes gone. There probably was only 2 or 3 points in it against the breeze, against the elements. I know I was saying just we're in a decent position, but Larray seemed to find another gear maybe with 10 minutes to go in the half, and hit some big scores. Probably Shane Morgan's free, probably he must have been 70, 75 yards. Maybe I'm exaggerating that, but that sailed over the bar. Darren Shaughnessy got a couple more, and only for a huge save for Darren Walsh from Darren Shaughnessy when he was 1-on-1. The game could have been beyond doubt at half time. That's how dominant Loughrea finished the half. Turrick did some good stuff, but it wasn't frequent enough. It was inconsistent as in through the game or through the half. Whilst they got some fine scores, I think Loughrea would have been content enough with what they were doing at the back. Probably put a lot of pressure on the Turrick puck out in the first half. And we probably struggled to win breaking ball when we went long, and when we went short, they pushed up so quick, and with the conditions, it allowed them to push up quick, and we had to take a second touch or an extra touch, and they were able to pounce and turn over or put us under pressure on the next ball, which was, you always like to get a short ball, you always like to get the second ball off, and we struggled at times with doing that through elements and through pressure from Loughrea and their work rate. And I think, as I said, the tone was set after 10 minutes in the first half, what they were going to bring to the table.
Joe, hasn't Cullen Killeen in the middle coming into the team with Loughrea this year, and Joe Mooney for me moving them back to wing back? It really seems to sort of transform this Loughrea team.
Yeah, his work rate the last night was top drawer. The amount of ball he moved, but so intelligently. He get the ball. It was a look up. It was a pass to a man in a better position. There was no waste. And his willingness to go in and win that dirty ball. I thought he was outstanding the last night. He linked the play so well from defence to attack. Turner couldn't get a handle on him. He was instrumental in everything that Loughrea did. Everything good they did. He was a real handful. He was against Clarenbridge too. He was like that as well. Probably not as dominant, but he worked so hard. And he was definitely a major influence in the game. Unfortunately, for Turnock, he was hard to deal with. And Turnock Moore didn't deal with him, and he had an influence in the game and how the result finished.
John, I'll come to you obviously. Just looking at Loughrea's performance, as we mentioned there, they went 5-3 up, then Turlock make it 5-all, and you're thinking, even though Turlock haven't played that well, they've got 3 points from Sean Loftus, they could build their way into this, but then Loughrea nearly take control of it again.
Yeah, and I think as Joe said, Loughrea had a lot of the groundwork done at that stage, even though it wasn't showing on the scoreboard. But if you're playing against the breeze and you're level or only a point or two down and half time is clipping up towards it, you'd have to be happy with it. But in the 11 minutes before half time, Loughrea outscored Turlock by 7 points to 1. If you added that, get 5 points up at half time, they could and should have been 8 up only for Darragh Walsh's save. And that would have been out to 11 only for the save he made just after half time. So that game could have been gone from Turlock as easily as that. But I just thought it was those flurry of scores before half time, not only putting Loughrea 5 up, but I just thought it was a huge psychological boost to them as well. And it left Turlock chasing the game after that. And if I'm not mistaken, Sean Loftus was the only Turlock player to score more than once from play.
Yeah.
With 3 points. Very hard. Like Conor Walsh's frees, and none of them were easy. They were horrible frees to take in that dirty, wet evening from distance. And in fairness, he nailed them. But it's hard to win a match when you've only one forward scoring more than once from play, and goal threats weren't coming either. So to a large degree, Thurrock were chasing the game, even though there was only a point or two in it right up to the end. I know the goal came at the end and put 5 in it, but somehow or other it was Loughrea's to lose right throughout that second half, and I don't think they were going to be quite honest. Even as close as Thurrock got to them, there just looked to be a kick always in, and particularly like the Darren Shaughnessy, I thought was outstanding. Quarter final at Tiernan Killeen. I just said to Joe there earlier that they reminded me a bit of Thomas's. Like Thomas would win a semi-final or a final, and it would be somebody it wouldn't be a marquee player that would have 1-2 or 1-3 beside him. Maybe even someone that came on or something would get a few key scores. Loughrea have a bit of resemble that. Thurlock don't. You're still dependent on your free taker for a huge amount of them. And those sort of, I don't think the evening, it didn't suit anybody, of course, but I think it less suited Thurlock more than Loughrea, to be quite honest. But you got to play what's there in it. But in fairness, I think Loughrea were well worth their win in the end. And I don't think anybody could complain about that.
John, we obviously even talking about how horrible of an evening it was, but for Shane Morgan to get the 3 long range frees he gets between the 19th and 29th minute, that just nearly gives Loughrea so much momentum when you get scores like that on a
It
difficult
does,
evening.
it does, but equally so, like some of the frees Conor Walsh got in that third quarter going into the final quarter under massive pressure as well and nailed them. And that equally gave Thurlock a good lift in it. It was just, I thought the difference was just those scores from play and particularly the threat. Like it didn't always work out for Loughrea, but they looked a more threatening team than Thurlock in it, and a lot of the scores came from it. And I just it's hard to know where Thurlock go from here. Like there's an enormous talent there. They've tried everything in over the years, but if I'm not mistaken, 40 years since they won the county title. I think only twice in the final ever since. If I'm not mistaken, 1990 and a few years ago. And for such a passionate club, and with a club that has always been there or thereabouts, and has always contributed every successful Galway team, whether it's underage or senior. I grew up watching PJ Qualter and Frank Burke. We lived through the Martin Naughton, the Jerry Burke years, the Daithí Burke more recently. Like they've been such a contributor to Galway hurling. And you even look at the teams that have won county championships since they have, that wouldn't have that tradition and everything in it. And I suppose a good few Thurlock people since the weekend, and it's almost an annual conversation, and it's not. And it's not been done. They've brought in outside coaches. They've worked with them. The talent is there, and I've often thought if they won one, you could start to see a flow of it coming from there. But it must be a bitter pill for Thurlock people to follow after Saturday evening, and especially as there was no robbery about it. The better team actually won in the evening. I think most people would concede that.
Yeah, Joe, obviously when you come to Turlock, like you've obviously been there involved in the senior role and you're heavily involved in the club. Does it sort of feel like at the minute, just when you look at some of the Turlock players, they're obviously getting to a couple of players like Jamie Holland, Sean Loftus, these players getting probably near their 30s now. Does it sort of feel like you're at a crossroads at the minute, or where do you feel Turlock are?
Oh yeah, look at after I suppose so close after the game, you're wondering, it's a long way back, like it's a year away, of course, like it's John, I said no one can put their finger on it. Like I'll give you a scary stat here. In 2007, myself and Fernie Ford were involved with a minor team that Jerry Burke managed, say Ronan and Dahi's dad. 2007, we played Thomas's, beat them in a replay. Thomas's have gone on to win, is it 8 senior titles? We played 2 finals. It's scary. And on show in that minor final was Dahi Burke, Ronan Burke, Kevin Hussey. You had James Regan, you had David Burke, Conor Cooney. That's what was there, and to see what one side had done. But I go back to it when they won their first one, was at Loughrea they beat under John Burke, their first one, and the way they've kicked on. And John, you said it, it's that first one. It gives you, look at what Loughrea can do when they're under pressure against Clarenbridge. They've improved again to beat Turlock. Like it's that confidence that you can't buy. You can only get from winning and winning finals. And unfortunately, we haven't done that. How are we going to do it? Like, there's no magic formula. You've got to get up again. Like the club player now is they'll take 3 or 4 weeks off. They'll be back in the gym in 3 weeks. And that's all you can do. You're hoping someday to click, but there has to be, you've got to look at each other. You've got to look. The club has to, look at what it's doing. Not saying it's blaming anyone. Far from it. It's everyone is doing their best and will continue to do so. I know that. I know the people that are there in the club, and you're just hoping that it'll just come together for. But Paul, it is an issue. Yeah, you've lads pushing on. That minor final is 18 years ago. So that'll tell you the age of some of the guys that are out there. Now a lot of them were 16 at the time and 17, but it's of course you're scratching your head driving home saying, is this ever going to happen? We ever going to have our day? But that sport, you got to stay at it. You got to stay coming back. And 40 years is a long time. I was very young. I can barely remember it, but it's that's what has to drive the players as well. As I said, there's no magic formula. Like John has said, we've tried everything, whether it's outside, inside. Everything has been thrown at this. Got close a couple of times. 2020. Thomas has beat us by a point or two. Dahi Burke went off injured after 20 minutes. Even 2023, so close again, a point or two. But it's still not a win, and that's the most important thing is the win, but also for confidence and go and do it again. But they've got to stay trying. They've got to take this. It'll hurt, and then they've just got to get back on it again. And whenever they get back, and whoever that's with, I don't know whether the management will be there or not. That's for the club to decide and all that. But I suppose you got to sit down and look at it. Are we progressing? Have we progressed over the last couple of years? Have we improved? That's all questions that need to be asked, and the players will have to ask that as well, and sit down and talk about it, and try and right the wrongs and get back up and go again. Because that's obviously what Loughrea, John, were probably in this. You said, was it 5 finals they'd lost before they got over the line? So yeah. It's not uncommon. It's not unheard of. It is difficult, but where there's a will, there's a way. You've got to stay trying. And I know these group of lads. I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of them for 10 or 12 years, from under 14 up to senior, and I know what they give to it. But sometimes it isn't fair. And sport isn't fair. But if you keep going, you'll earn the right, and I believe they will. But they'll just have to get back on the horse again in a couple of weeks and start thinking about next year.
While you referenced, Joe, that minor team under Jerry Burke back in 2007, ye still have been winning minors and winning underage over the year. Like there's been a conveyor belt still coming through there.
Yeah.
So it's not as if it's you had a couple of good minor teams and they're now reaching into their 30s. Give you an interesting line, actually. Back in 1982, I was on a Salthill team. Now, we were predominantly a football club. We'd won minor under 21 and all this, but we'd field junior B hurling, under 21B, and we got to an under 21B county final. We beat the likes of Ballinderry and Abbeynockmoy, established senior intermediate teams along the way, and we gave a damn good run to Athenry in the county final. Likes of Pascal Healy, Billy Caulfield, all of these lads. Pat Higgins was all playing with them, and okay, we're beaten not hugely, but we're beaten by a better team in it. 5 years later, Athenry won their first county senior title, and a rake of those lads were on it. By the following year, we were struggling to field a team at under 21 or junior. So you can reach forks in the road. Now, I know we were sort of exceptional, a city team, or all of this sort of stuff. You have totally different problems in it. But I often wondered what would have happened to us if we'd won that. We'd damn good hurlers on it, like Tom Noel and guys like that went on, played with Galway in it. So you reach those forks in the road. But Thurlock have continued to turn out great minor under 20 teams. You see it in, the vocational, the schools teams, all of that. You will always see, it's huge in it. It's just to make that breakthrough again, and not even a breakthrough, but to actually win it at senior, because you've shortlisted every single year in it. But at the same time, it's just impossible to know what needs to be done next.
Oh, you're right, John. We haven't been dependent on that 2007 minor team. I was involved with a minor team, say Sean and Sean Loftus, Jamie Allen. We won 2 back-to-back, and then went on to win 2 under 21 back-to-back, which the club had never won. And that was a massive, stepping stone to senior. And we've gone on to win 2 under 20 championships since. Um, but it just for whatever reason, it just like for all that those players, it hasn't come together. And you'll have different people from outside saying you don't have a marquee forward and you don't have this, but it's a combination of you need a little bit of luck. Like as I said, 2020, Di Burke goes off injured after 15, 20 minutes. To the last final, Sean Loftus missed it. He was injured. Like, but other teams deal with that. You've got to deal with that as well. And I said, no one can put their finger on it. In fairness, it's not a blame game out in turret. There's no one, saying this should be done or that shouldn't be done. We're all trying to work together to see can we get this group over the line. And but yeah, it's frustrating. Yesterday there was a lot of thinking and will it happen and won't it happen? And I can assure you, no one feels as hurt or more hurt than the players. Because I know the effort they gave, and I know the effort some of the guys did all year with holidays and they're putting their lives on. And like, that's every club. That's not just Turrick. And we're still in a position where we get to the knockout stages and have a real chance of success. But we just haven't been able to bridge that. And I suppose the longer it goes on, the more pressure that piles upon you. And the more
Absolutely. The
questions you're
burden
asking
gets
yourself.
greater,
Yeah,
doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
it's a rolling ball. You get that pressure gathers and gathers, but you
Are
can't
you
walk away from it.
confident
It's
of
in our DNA, Paul. You just and John, you're gonna. That's the GA player. You will stay coming back, and you just hope your day will come.
are you confident, Joe, what's coming behind now over the next few years in Turlock?
Um, Look at. I think if you sat down and looked at our results this year at underage, I think our 20s struggled. Now Killian Traers missed all that championship through injury. Our minors didn't win a group game. Under 16s were in a Shield final. Under 15s got demoted down to A1, or under 14s are in A1. And now nothing wrong with all of that, but you don't have to be winning championships. You look at other teams, Corofins, the Thomases, all these. What you need to be doing is picking players off it. I believe there's players on every team coming through. I suppose it's obviously bringing them through, but it's bringing the right player through as well. We could put out a team of maybe 12 defenders, out on the. We need to maybe as a club develop a marquee forward, a guy that is natural in there. It comes to him. Like I look at the team that started the last day, and four of the forwards are more comfortable at the back. That's where they would have played their underage hurling. While they're very good for us up front, like Sean Loftus 3 points the last day, super. Connor Walsh, his frees were exceptional. I thought, John, you said it, like some of the frees he hit under pressure, he kept us in the game.
You need a goal scorer, don't you?
That's it. That's it. And that comes, that's up to the club maybe to develop that. I've said that the last couple of weeks. We have to develop someone like that. We have to be patient and give someone years of that, coaching and training and leave them in that position and develop them. And that's a hard thing to do at club level as well, because you have a manager at under 14 who wants to win his championship, or a manager at under 15 who wants to win his championship. So his best player has to be out midfield, when realistically, in 5 years' time, the club could need that player in the corner forward. That could be his best position, but because a manager wants to be successful, he wants them out in the middle of the pitch dominating the game. So there's a little bit of that, and that's in every club. That's not just Turrick. But I suppose people will probably look at us and say, well, and it's been said to me the last 2 days, you won't win a game without a goal scorers. But we did manage goals during the year. Like it's sometimes you have to have a pattern of play. I think Loughrea snuffed us out very well Saturday evening and stopped us creating anything. They were quite happy for our forwards to hit the ball or score points from going away from the goal, but they didn't allow us to attack the goal. So look, it is something that's been discussed. It's not easy. But as I said, these are a good bunch of lads. I've been lucky enough to work with them, and I know for a fact, they'll do everything they can to get back to another semi-final next year and hopefully go on from that. And that's all you can do. That's all you can do with the right people involved and the club supporting them. It's all you can do as a GA player, get back up and go again after a loss.
When you win a Joe, there won't be a bail left in a hitch.
John, I'd be happy to burn everything.
If you even just spoke at the last 20 minutes of this game, Jamie Ryan, Kevin Killeen, Tiernan Killeen combined putting Loughrea 16-9 up. Then Conor Walsh gets 3 frees to put it to 16-12. Darren Shoxey then stretches it back out to 17-12. Conor Walsh gets a free to make it 17-13. Sean Lennon, which is fantastic to see him back on the pitch again, makes it 17-14. Conor Walsh gets a free at 17-15, but there is a bit of injury time on 61 minutes. But then Kieran Hanrahan drives forward. He gets a goal, makes it 117 to 15 points. And just unfortunate there, John, for Darragh Walsh with the weather and the lights and everything.
Totally and absolutely. I think the game was up at that stage, to be
Yeah.
quite honest. It was winding it down, and you know, I played in goal for a while. It's a horrible position in the whole lot of it. And the only thing I would say in that regard is Thurlockmore wouldn't have been in the game was it not for both saves, or either of the saves he made
Yeah.
either side of half time. So I think it was immaterial to the overall outcome. Horrible to see happening to anybody in it, especially in the year that's been in it for him. I've no doubt he put that right behind him, because it wasn't actually a factor in deciding the game at that stage or whatever. Kieran Hanrahan was going for a point that would have put 3 between them and wrapped it up, but
No, I agree, John. I think I'd say if we watch back the video, how many players dropped the ball or the ball skidded out of their hand in the whole game out the field, and we didn't take a bit of notice of it. It's just the fact that that's such a position, the goalie, and Darragh was probably in, I want to get this ball down the field and get my team on the attack, so look at it was.
But the game was up at that stage.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the
the
save he made in the first half, and again the dispossession in the second half were top drawer, and he should be. That's what he should be remembered for in the game as Turlock supporters. I think that's certainly what they, I certainly that's what I can think of. Not when the game was up, and at that stage, we were beating Dockett. I think the time was up.
Just on Loughrea at the minutes, lads, even the way they battle back against Cambridge, but when you look at it, how they're structured defensively with Paul Cohen, Johnny Cohen, and then Kieran Hanrahan and Shane Morgan seem to be playing better every week for them. Ian Hanrahan and Cullen Kineen around the middle, and then you obviously look at the attack. Darren Shaughnessy, one of the standout performers there at the weekend. Tiernan Killeen, Cayman Killeen, Jamie Ryan coming back into form. There seems to be a real, I suppose, structure and organisation about Loughrea, and I think that was one of the big things coming away from Saturday night.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I've noticed they've got better. The Clare Bridge game, and especially the last 20 minutes, like their season was on the line. Their work rate in the last 20 minutes against Clare Bridge was top drawer. And I think they built on that. I think they probably went away for the 2 weeks and obviously looked at Turlock and how to nullify them. But also, I'd say they worked on their speed, how they start the game. They certainly didn't let Turlock get a foothold in the game. They wanted to dominate the physical encounters, and they did. But those players have, like Shane Morgan was immense. Their half back line was immense. I've said that already. And their midfield, their full back line just kept everything going out the pitch. There was never a threat to Garrett Duckman's goal because they defended so well that when the Turlock lads got it, they were under pressure and they were going out the pitch. And Turlock still shot some good scores, but as I said earlier, they were going out the pitch. And then the work of their midfielders and half forward line, and then the supply inside, like it was quality ball into to Vince Morgan and to Darren Shaughnessy and Jim Roberts. Like there was quality ball. It was it was at an angle. It was across. They could run onto it, and that's hard to defend. And you could see in the game Dahi started to drop back a small bit to try and protect and help, and which was a natural thing to do, and that probably stopped Turlock getting him up the field, to force his game or our game. But I think their hurling intelligence is very high as well. I think they play a good brand of hurling, but they know each other so well now as well, and they're a long time at this as well. Like I was, they've been in semi-finals I think nearly every year, the last 4 or 5 years as well. Like so, this is nothing new to them, and they're coming good the right time, and that sometimes happens. There can be a hangover from last year. They probably were disappointed with the Fohenagh game, getting beaten by a point, and very unlucky, and I'm sure that hurt, and it takes a while to get it flowing again how you want to, even though you have the work done, it just takes something to click. And I think it was maybe the Clare Bridge game and the last 20 minutes when their championship was on the line, Jerry Burns struck the goal and here they are now, an hour away from another county title.
It's the big thing with them this year, John. Even since the Crowell game, they've bounced back really well. But then you consider it was Tiernan Killeen the last day, it was Darren Shaughnessy. There's a different player in attack standing up for them each day.
There is, and I think what Joe's getting there, they look a settled team. They look a settled team. There isn't a weak line in them. A few decent subs coming on there as well. I think the key thing to them this year, though, is the pressure is off them. They've won it last year, so they're not. We're talking about Thurlock earlier and the pressure increasing year on year. Like this is Loughrea's 10th county final in 23 years. I know they've lost a lot of them, and they've a lot of hard days in county finals, but they got that monkey off their back last year to a large degree in winning it. And you see that in them. They're not panicking. They didn't panic, in quarter final. They didn't panic the last day either. And they've guys stepping forward. Like they're a real county final, county champions team where they're not dependent on one player. Like Thomas can go out the next day and keep Darren Shaughnessy scoreless. That isn't going to mean they're going to win it, or keep Tiernan Killeen, because there's a lot of scores coming from all over a lot of the pitch, and a lot of good lines in it. Like they're a quality team. They're a quality team. They've a pep in their step. They've a confidence about themselves, I think, without it being an arrogance, right? And Thomases have the exact same. It comes with winning. You see it in all the sports or whatever. Once you've won a few, the pressure is off. You're just not going to panic in it. And they certainly didn't the last day. They didn't, and won the next day. But they're a good. They're the team to beat, I think, to be quite honest.
Yeah, obviously it sets up a repeat of the 2022 final, as we mentioned, between Thomas's and Loughrea. As well, funny enough, as I mentioned, Thomas's and Loughrea met in the Junior A final at the weekend. Thomas is winning that out, 125 to 120 in Duggan Park yesterday. But if we look at the first semi-final then, between Thomas's and Crowell, John, early on, Crowell were leading. Well, Thomas's were leading 6-4 on 21 minutes, but there's a few times Crowell worked the ball inside and they were sort of half goal chances. But you were just thinking they were half goal chances that Crowell needed to score against the Thomas's outfit.
100%. Absolutely. I think if Trapple to have any chance, they needed to nail a couple of those. They needed to build a lead. Once this remained a dogfight, there was only going to be one winner. And as sure as night follows day or whatever, the goals came for Thomas's. It ended up being a comfortable enough win. Um, I wonder, had a couple of those chances gone in for Cropple, would Thomas's have got rattled, or would they have just reverted to type? We're never going to know. It's immaterial in it, but I thought Thomas's looked, once they didn't take in too much water in that opening quarter when the chances were there. We were just waiting what size the margin of all of this was going to be. You're referencing Loughrea and Thomas's from the final 3 years ago. I think in the history of it all, we need to look back 13 years as well, because Thomas has won their first county title, beating Loughrea. And that set Thomas's off. If Thomas had been beaten that day, would they have won another seven after that or not, in any shape or form? And there are a few survivors from those teams. The most surprising, I have to say, when I look back on it, obviously we knew David Burke would be there, Conor Cooney was there, Aina Burke came on as a sub. There was somebody else as well came on as a sub, and that wasn't surprising.
Darabert, possibly.
Dara Burke, no, Dara Burke started that final at centre back.
Oh, yes, he
I
did.
have
That's
to
where he
say,
started out.
totally
Yeah.
forgotten about in it, and look at him still going strong in all of that. And then with Loughrea, Johnny Cohn is obviously still there, Paul Hoban, and Jamie Ryan came on as a sub in that final 13 years ago. It's an absolute credit, the whole lot of them, that they're still going strong, and particularly the likes of Paul Hoban, Jamie Ryan, that because they, unlike the Thomases lads, suffered, horrible county final days and have still kept coming back and coming back in it. So there's a lot there that's still carrying forward to. I know I'm missing one Thurlock player from that time, but it'll come to me and come to
It wasn't
Shane
James
Cooney.
Regan.
Shane Cooney,
Shane Cooney.
of course, came on as a sub that
Yeah.
day as well. But it's some run from all of those guys. But to go back to the semi-final the last day, I thought, it was comfortable enough for Thomas's. I don't think Crockwell will or should be overly disappointed either. It's been a good year. They've made progress in it. The likes of Kieran Lean looks like a brilliant, brilliant prospect, and hopefully year on year he can, he's a couple of more years of development only out of leaving cert. But he's a great prospect. There's no doubt about that. And great to see someone like that coming through. So I think when the initial disappointment lifts for Crockwell, they'll feel they've made a lot of progress, and there's plenty more room for them to go as well.
Joe, even when Tom Monaghan gets it back to 8-6, you're sort of thinking Crowell could really, I suppose, last 3 minutes of the first half push on here, and then bang, Éanna Burke gets the goal like he usually does throughout this year's championship and championships gone by.
Yeah, no, it was some goal. It was a long puck out on top of Connor Cooney, and he just broke it. But I've watched it back, and if you watch Éanna before Connor even went for the ball, he was making the move, anticipating that this is where the ball's going to land, like a real good forward. And when he got in and goal, his finish was top drawer. And like Thomas has played him further out the field this year, and I suppose that's because Victor has been going so well inside, Victor Manzo. So they've been able to drop him out a small bit, and he's been shooting points. But that goal was, you said that there yourselves. If Crowell had that goal, it would have put questions on Thomas's, but they got the goal, and no better team than to manage the half, but manage the game then as well. You could see, David Burke was pushing lads around the pitch, and Connor Cooney could afford to drop a little bit more, and people would be saying, why is he dropping so much? But it gives space to the inside guys, and then Connor's the one delivering the ball, and the ball that's put into those forwards is top drawer, and they win it and they take you on, and because that first goal came, they had a license to go and play their game, on their terms, and Crowell and after half time, Crowell put in a huge 5-10 minutes to claw it back. Tom Monaghan led the charge, and they were,
Yeah, 4 points in a row, 33
yeah,
minutes, leveled
yeah.
it.
You felt this is really game on, like. But I think it was a David Burke got the next point for Thomas's, and they clawed back the initiative again, and it was a Victor's goal then after that, and it was, I think it was a sucker punch to Crowell, and it probably, it knocked the wind out of their sails a little bit, and Thomas has controlled it from there on in. Then
Joe, just on it, like, what about Victor Manzo throughout this championship in particular? Like, he's nearly been, I suppose, so consistent in this team, but now it seems maybe with the absence of Oisin Flannery, he's even stepping up more. He got the goal last day against Larkins, and even the way he took the second goal, really impressive. And even in the first half, he was causing Crowell problems.
yeah, he's in the form of his life, isn't he? And probably maybe with Oisin being gone, he felt the need to step up, but he certainly has. He's been breathtaking, he's just a guy that's doing all the right things. When he receives the ball, he's doing the right thing. He's taking on the man when he should. He's putting it over the bar when he should. And that just comes with confidence and having good people around you as well. You can imagine David Burke, Connor Cooney, Shane Cooney, Finton, you know, Dara Burke, all that experience guiding you as a young player like that. That's huge, and huge for development. And you can see he's grown into it. Huge player for them. Like he's been exceptional. And the last day he crowned it with his goals, But really impressive. Really, really impressive. And as I said, it goes back to the quality of ball he's getting as well. It's real forwards ball, and he's setting it alight at the moment.
Obviously, then John Victor Manzo gets another goal. Dara Burke gets another goal. Then it puts Thomas's 4-16 to 17 ahead, and at that stage they do have it wrapped up. But when Crowell do look back at it at some stage, it probably will be disappointed and one or two times when they did try and work the ball out when it probably just wasn't on.
Absolutely. Like, you know, by the time the second half was underway, you realised Crawford was going to need at least a goal, if not a couple of them. Thomas have conceded one goal all year. They've scored, I think, 11. Victor Manso's got 6 of them. There's a huge difference in all of that. The likelihood, and we'd probably see it in the final as well. I mean, Loughrea will struggle to get goals against that Thomas's backline. But I don't think Trot will ever really were threatening to make that sort of comeback, or that they were going to, if they got one, it was going to be really as much. That's a very, very good Thomas's defence. Um, and it just went to a natural conclusion, to be honest, like that it petered out, I thought, from there, to be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
Thomas is winning.
sorry, Paul. I think Keenan Mahoney deserves, to come back in and be as efficient and hurling so well again. I think
And to get a yellow so early.
so we're in the game, yeah. But like that's some full backline to try and break down, as John said. They're mean. They're mean both physically, and they don't give up anything easy. And they're impressive. And Crowell just couldn't break them down. The last day, and maybe that comes with experience as well. But I think he's really steadied the ship since he's come back. Finton's back to himself again after being injured. So, it's a tough task to take them on in a county final, but no better men than Loughrea to fire it up.
And then you have Benjamin Button out in the middle of the field, David Burke shooting a couple of
Yeah.
points as if like a
Yeah,
young fella,
you have to admire him. He's
totally and absolutely.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
and when you have somebody like that anchoring it, the whole
Yeah.
lot, captained his county 8 years ago to win All Ireland, and is hurling as if he's going for his first ever
Yeah.
medal.
I suppose, John, we forget they were All Ireland club champions 18 months ago.
Absolutely,
And we forget that. They got beaten in the semi-final last year, but we forget that, and they put in one hell of a performance that day in Croke Park. And I've seen a little bit of something in them again the last day that's igniting a small
It's
bit
to
of
their
game.
absolute credit to be able to come back
They are.
this year
You'd
after
be
the run
envious.
was ended last year.
Yeah.
Totally and absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, phenomenal,
You'd have to be envious
phenomenal
of them.
team, phenomenal club. There's no doubt about it. Like what they've got out of, the minor success, junior A success, doing all of this, it's with, I think, as we said, something like 200 houses, unless they put up another couple of hundred there in the last couple of years, and I doubt it. But it's a huge return in it. Sets it up well, doesn't it?
Does.
Just there, you mentioned David Burke, and I feel it's probably right to mention Tom Monaghan too, because what he did for Crowell Saturday night, carried ball after ball after ball throughout the full 60 minutes, and literally emptied the tank. But he's been so central for Crowell in this year's championship and on the run to the semi-final.
It's totally and absolutely, and in many ways, what you would expect from a county man back with his
Yeah.
club and leading like that. And in fairness to him, he's done that consistently over the last few years as well, like that. That often guys expend so much with it with an inter-county team by the time they get back, and particularly a club that is still sort of on the way up or whatever, or developing from that. It's brilliant to see a county player stand out like he should, but we don't always see that. We don't always see that.
Yeah, he left it all out there, Paul. He gave everything for the cause. And that's all you could ask of him. He when the game was slipping away, he was still making those runs. He was still chipping in with the points, linking the play. A fine performance. And one he should be proud of. Because it's when you're getting beaten like that, and it's hard. It can be hard, and there's pressure on you because you're the main man. But he certainly didn't shy away from that. I thought he had a phenomenal game as well.
Just a word on Crowell too, like it's big progress for a semi-final, and to be able to look back on this year with a lot of pride. I know it's obviously disappointed to get defeated in a semi-final, and you always want to get to a county final, but when you consider where they've came from the last few years.
Yeah, I think they did very well. Like the win over Sarsfields, the game was gone. They got back into it. They got that had everything that game. But and for long periods the last day they gave Thomas's a lot to think about. But I think they will look back. They beat Loughrea in the group. They topped their group. Dealt with the month's layoff going into the Sarsfields game very well. Won that game in extra time. And that can only benefit them go forward, and Ian Daniels should be proud of the work he's done out there, and Niall Healy and those, they've put in a big shift this year. And I know I met Niall a couple of weeks back, and they were proud of the work they'd done, and you could see that the last day, they deserved to be in the semi-final, and they gave really positive account of themselves.
John, when you're looking at then a couple of the players for these clubs that have impressed, obviously we've mentioned Victor Manzo has been unbelievable for Thomas's this year. Even Kieran Hanrahan, if you're looking at him at the back, Darren Shaughnessy at the edge of the square, and obviously Kieran Lean and Tiernan Lean have been central for Crowell as well. Surely now some of these players will have to come into Micheál Donoghue's thoughts.
You'd like to think so, and I think that's where it will be helpful that we're going to have the provincial competitions back in January, and which you'd imagine would be an ideal environment to actually try out players like that. There's a huge step up in fairness, even from semi-finals, county semi-finals, and that into an inter-county scenario, but at least these lads are putting their hands up, so let's give them a chance to go and do it. There will be hopefully that opportunity in January to go and try out players like that, and let's see, because we do need new blood in the county squad. Like, I mean, that's a whole totally different debate. And who knows, you might have somebody who's only just above ordinary at club level and gets into that inter-county one and takes off. But there certainly at least are some. Maybe I think Micheál Donoghue and I think Galway supporters would prefer if there was a lot more that were shoving their hands up or standing out in that regard, and particularly as forwards. But there are certainly some there that need a look at and need a decent chance. Problem is when you get around to the start of the National League, they're almost like championship matches. The room for experimenting is less and less and less, and you're into college stuff as well. So at least get them in there, give them a run during January, and let's see where they go to, because nothing ventured, nothing gained it. And there is a county final coming up for a lot of guys, like the Tiernan Killeen, who's in that county setup, but you look at like his performances have he's ready to step up to another level there. And I think we could learn a lot if you're looking at that part of it alone. You could learn a lot from the county final, because these are two fairly evenly matched teams. They know how to dog out a result. You'll get a fair test of character as much as anything else out of each of these, because they'll drag it out of each other. So that in itself is almost like a test of that. It's just who can live in that sort of arena. And in that context alone, it should be fairly fascinating. Looking forward to it, actually. The team that doesn't know how to lose a county final against the team that has lost 10 out of 13, I think, was when I counted them up. But they are the champions going into it, and it's theirs to lose.
And even Joe, as I mentioned, like a lot of these younger players now seem ready to make the step up.
Well, I suppose they definitely deserve a shot, don't they? And that's the beauty of the Walsh Cup being back. They will get there. And look at they're not the be all and end all games, but it does give them a taste of what's ahead. And John mentioned there, we have a tough league, next spring. So will they be ready for that? I'm not sure. But there's a lot of work to be done with these guys off the pitch, condition wise, and I'm sure that started. I have no doubt those guys are working away on that, and it will take time, But I think the management know what it'll take, and they'll be patient. And I suppose the Galway supporters have to be as well. You can't judge any young guy on 1-2 games. You have to give them a run of games, and they'll have to earn that spot. But like we've seen some good performances. Obviously Rory Burke has been mentioned, Jason Rabbit, Killian Traers. These guys have got a taste of it last year. Iron Island. So they're on the fringes. They're in the inner circle that are going to be brought along conditioning wise and hurling wise. And there's a lot more. I've mentioned that Darren Shaughnessy looks to be pushing on there again, and there's a lot more out there. But I'd imagine we'll see a lot of these guys in the Walsh Cup, and probably the league. We know what the stalwarts like Dahi and Conor Cooney and Conor Whelan, we know what they have to bring to the table. But it's getting, can we get, like, it's very hard to get 6 or 7, but can we get 3 or 4, into the setup this year that are able to contribute, and be a part of a squad, that is building and going the right direction. And that's what we're looking for. Like, as I said, people thinking you're going to get 10 players out of, when you look at it, we haven't won under 20. It's different down in Tipperary. Them guys bounce into the senior setup full of confidence, winning All Ireland. We don't have that luxury. So we're bringing guys in that are, maybe a little bit shy, a little bit quiet. It's going to take them time to grow into the senior setup. But I think the management is there and giving them time, and the Galway supporters will hopefully get behind them, and we'll see, as I said, 3, 4, hopefully 5 of those guys playing a big part in the league.
If we take a look at the Senior B final, then Lee Mellows 216, Ahascragh Fohenagh 19 points. A lot of Lee Mellows players quick to remind me of my first power rankings, where Lee Mellows were bottom of the table. So I'll take that. I was wrong there, and congratulations to everyone. Lee Mellows there, but John, when you look at it, Castlegar being the only city club at the minute, it is big for, I suppose, hurling in the city. And now I know a lot of people from Ahascragh, I won't think that today, but to have another city club back in senior hurling, it is a positive when you look at it for the, I suppose, overall landscape of Galway hurling.
It totally and absolutely. I mean, I'm from Salt Hill. I've seen it. I've seen how the difficulty in trying to develop a hurling club here, especially where football is so strong. But even our neighbours, Rahun, just up the road from me, previous times you had Menlo Emmets, and Castlegar, like the most successful club in Galway, but they haven't won it. They haven't won it in what is it, 40 something years, back in '84. Um, I've never known Mellows other than them being a senior club all my life. And I know the senior A or senior B and all this sort of stuff. And I must say I've always disagreed with that. It's you're either one or the other. So for them not to go down to intermediate is big. I won't say it's huge, but it's big in terms of the city and trying to develop it from there. Um, like similarly, Castlegar, they're thereabouts, but not threatening a county title. Mellows, as we all know, came 8 years ago and won it, and could nearly have added a second one with it as well. And a lot of those players are still there. They actually won it with a very young team back then, with one or two exceptions. You have the likes of David Collins now putting it all back in there as in management and the whole lot. And you've guys like John Lee was the team doctor, the whole lot of it as well yesterday. So they're there, and that'll give them a big boost into it. It'll be no consolation, as you said, to Ahascragh, and none whatsoever, to have to go now and start the whole process of that again. But in terms of the county and in terms of hurling and in terms of the city, that's a pretty significant result. And it's not just a big win for Mellows, it's a big win for the city as well, I have to say.
When you look at it too, I was adding up the scores from yesterday's final, Joe. Ty Karen finishing up with 112 out of Lee Mellows 216. Even when you go back to the county success, like Ty Karen has been Lee Mellows' most consistent performer throughout the last few years, and once again there yesterday against Ahascragh.
Yeah, he was. I seen some of the scores, and they were everything. They were frees, they were from play, there was line balls, there was every score you could imagine. It was a game for him, a game of the ages. He just, he embraces, he loves that pressure. He seems to thrive on it. And the bigger the game, the more you get from him. He's been a spiritual leader for them for a long, long time. Going back to their county final success in 2017. He's been the driving force. And when you drop down to senior B, and it can be easy. Maybe you've won your senior A, and to kind of walk away from it a small bit, or maybe put in less of an effort. And that could have happened Mellows this year. Like, I think Ballinderry caught them in the first round of the senior B, and the wheels could have come off. But David Collins obviously circled the wagons, and they had enough in the group that they got back on track, and maybe sprung late to win the semi final against Kilmadina. But I think again, no more than Loughrea and Thomas is in senior A, Mellows have improved as it's gone on. I think Ahascragh maybe might have been blitzing every team in their group and winning the games well. Mellows have had to work a little bit harder, and I think yesterday that's shown. And getting back to Tig, he led the charge up front. Now he was well assisted by a lot of quality players around the pitch, but to hit that amount of scores in the final just shows the character and the player he is and has been.
Yeah,
I
even
think, Paul, as well, it might be a good time for me to remind your listeners that Ty Karen is actually a Salt Hill man. He's from up the road here in Clybourne beside me. But Don't
Yeah,
fault
yeah,
him
yeah.
for making
You
the
know,
move. I did it myself back in the day or
yeah.
whatever. In order for him to develop, he needed to. But fair play to him, and he's done that, and he's been a superb performer for Mellows over the years, and none more so than Sunday's final.
You never tried to keep him with Sawtill, John, no?
I'm sure they did and all
Yeah,
of that, but the problem, and we all had it.
yeah,
We all had it, and some of us went to Castlegar, some of us went to Thurlough or whatever. You know, you want to give yourself a chance as a hurler as well, and you're showing up to go to a junior match, and there's ten players and stuff like that. You have no choice. It becomes almost impossible to do it in that regard. And he made the right move, no more than Donald O'Shea at the
yeah. I
moment.
was just about to
You know,
say.
if you've got it, you've got to give yourself a chance. It's just the environment we're in where football is number one. We've a huge population here, and if but the GA population is quite small. So he was absolutely dead right. Tom Nolan did, as I said before, John Joe Flaherty years back, the whole lot. And fair play to Tyke, he's made every minute of it count and the whole lot. But you never know, might get him back for a couple of years of junior in Salt Hill yet. So we won't give up all hope.
Yeah, even early on in this game, it was 9-9 at half time. And then Conor Kavanagh's goal was huge, put them 111 in front for Lee Mellows. Then Ty Karen, as I mentioned, got a goal on 45 minutes after Finta Glynn, the Ahascragh cornerback, was turned over. And that made it 2-13 to 13. And Ahascragh, to their credit, came back on 53 minutes to make it 2-13 to 17 points, 4 points in a row from Cathal Mannion. But then Lee Mellows just about able to hold on to their lead, 2-16 to 19 points in the end. Joe, you could even sense listening to David Collins after, I suppose, his excitement and his, I suppose, his sheer relief. Like even a couple of the Mellows players were talking that it was like, if we lost, we're relegated. If we win, we're up. There was obviously a lot of pressure, but you'd imagine for a club like Lee Mellows to have someone like David Collins over them who soldiered for the club for so many years is a massive positive too.
Oh, absolutely. His experience, as both, a club player, but as an inter-county player, and then to make that step up such a young age to go and manage the team, to have the belief that he could get something out of them, and to put the belief into that players that they should be in senior A, and that was proven yesterday. But you could see it in the pictures afterwards what it meant to supporters, what it meant to family members, to the players on the final whistle. That was as important to some of them as winning the final in 2017. It was huge, and like it is a big drop going from senior hurling down to intermediate, and no one wants to be the player that does that. No one wants to be on the team that does that. And Mellows are a proud club, and we haven't mentioned their facilities there in the city. Like they've top class facilities. That a lot of clubs would dream of. So they've put a huge amount of work in, and they're not always riding championships in A or the top end of things. They're not always playing those grades, but they're still able to bring players through, and they have a fine team, and I have no doubt they'll be very competitive in A hurling next year. And I'd imagine they'll hope David will stay on and bring that, what he's done the last 2 years, bring that with them, because it seems to work. There's a real close, feel to what they do. I know I've spoken to one or two from Mellows, and they're proud people, but definitely David is getting a lot out of this group, and they'd certainly like him to stay on and bring them maybe into more success in senior A if at all possible. But the fact that they're there and the relief, as I said, it's a big drop, and no one wants to be that player or that manager or that team that makes that drop. So they'll be delighted, and I'm sure they're celebrating.
Absolutely, yeah. And even with Ty Karen scoring 112, Conor Kavanagh got a goal, Conor Hines with 2 points, Jack Hastings and Luke McPhillippin with one each. And then on the Ahascragh side of things, Colin Mannion 12 points, Ronan Kelly 2 points, Owen Delaney 2 points, Luke Kennedy 2 points, and Robbie Green with a point. John, it's probably nearly every podcast throughout this year. Carl Mannion's name has been brought up when it comes to a hurling podcast, and again, it was a shootout between himself and Harron at stages at the weekend. But to finish up with 12 points again, and you could even sense Mellows players talking afterwards that they really had to obviously do a lot of homework on Colin Porrick at this level, but I don't think Carl Mannion has had a better year this year. Obviously, he would love to top it off with a senior B medal at the weekend.
Totally and absolutely. And even to hear Mellows players and supporters talking about him, and they only ever refer to him by his first name. And
Yeah.
like it's just the status he has in it. It's called this, called that. He's an outstanding hurler for club and county. Even when it's not going well with either of those teams, he manages to rise above all of that. We saw it this year again with Galway and stuff. He's just a quality player who owes nothing to his club and nothing to his county at this stage, nor does Pádraig either in that regard. And hopefully there's many more years left in Cathal and no reason there shouldn't be. He's just an outstanding hurler, a joy to watch. And you notice it as well. I know when we cover matches in other counties and stuff like that. I mean, the respect that is there for him and the respect for what he can do is enormous. With that, and it's thoroughly deserved. Like it, as I said, he'd be disappointed not to get across there. You know, we talk about numbers and stuff like that, and you know they would struggle in to a degree in that regard. But once you have somebody like that, you know they're not going to be down for too long. You'd imagine, like, because he's just going to light up. He's going to light up the stuff next year again.
Yeah, in fairness, I think Ahascragh are beginning to do a lot of things right. They brought in Jimmy Brown and Brian Mahoney this year, and you could see their intent bringing two men like that into the club. They've a minor B1 hurling final replay play against Micheál Brannocks too, and their under 16s had a win last week, so they're beginning to do a lot of right things at underage too. So they'll be keen, but for that. For now, Ahascragh will play Premier Intermediate, unfortunately for them. If we just take a look at the intermediate semi-finals, then first off, Joe, you're obviously involved with Ceylon this year. Probably disappointment, was it, looking on after?
Look at we ended up in the quarter final against Baha and got beaten by a point when we led for probably most of that game and just lost our way maybe with 5 minutes to go. Went from three up to three down and then brought it back to a point and had a goal chance to go ahead and even a point chance to level it, but didn't materialise. But no, the lads gave everything they could. They were, against Clymer in the preliminary quarterfinal, they were exceptional. And again against Baha, who, Clymer had come down 2 years ago and Baha had come down last year. So, to pitch your wits against them and, to put in two good performances and performances that you can build on. I know they had an extremely hard group with Skehanna, Montbellew and Aircourt, and unfortunately Silent have dropped to junior. But there'll be a serious outfit down there. I can't imagine they'll be down there for too long. But the lads gave it everything. They've some fine hurlers. They're trying to do the right things. So they can be proud of their efforts for the year.
Joe, just on that, was it a strange predicament in one sense? You were in a quarter final. If you went on to say win the championship, you were still going to be a junior club. Was that strange throughout the championship? I know obviously it's next year, but
Yeah, it was, Paul, but look, we all knew that. Like, there's no one arguing the case. I think, changes had to be made in the championship, so every team was aware of that. So it was just when you got the draw for the group, you seen you were with Aircourt and Skehanna, Montbellew and ourselves, there was going to be one team dropping down from that three, and they're not like, Skehanna, Montbellew was probably the first game, probably a game they should have won. There was nothing between the two teams. And even the Aircourt game, the last game, it was level at half time. Ceylon were two up, maybe 8 minutes, 10 minutes into the second half. And again, just, Aircourt just powered on that day. But then to pick themselves up to play Clymer, well, I was very impressed with the lads. Like they were on the floor. They were proud men. As I said to them, they were the guys that got the club up from junior to intermediate, and they were unfortunately the ones that went back down. But to pick themselves up in that 2 weeks and put in a performance against Clymer to win that game, it was as good a performance as I've seen from a team, that really 2 weeks before that were on the floor, didn't want to know about hurling, had felt they let everyone down. That was in their own heads. But, to pick themselves up, and I think the icing on the cake would have been maybe to beat Baha, that would have been really, really, something big for them. But unfortunately, that was just a step too far on the day. Again, a point is a hard loss. But I think when they look back on it and they analyse the videos for next year and move on to the junior, they'll see they have an awful lot to offer Galway hurling over the next couple of years once they, regroup and go again. But yeah, a difficult one. But there was Abbey were in the same boat, Annadown and those Kilvacanty, they all dropped down as well. So it's a hard one, but you know, you've got to pick yourself up as Noel, the chairman of the club, Noel Turn said, like there's a lot of teams dropping from senior down to intermediate that never would have been there before. So it's not just one team. There's a lot of teams that have to adjust and get their heads right for next year.
Were you looking on yesterday? You see Kinvara 121 to 110 up, and Behes somehow managed to score 1-9 on the trot to bring 2 points up. Adrian Toohey has a free, it flies over the bar, and Kinvara just hang on for a 2 point victory, 121 to 119.
Yeah, I actually tuned into it and at that stage it was like 121 to 10, and goal from Eddie Chewy. And the next thing I think Kinvara had pulled off maybe Pádraig Canole and Luca Danjo who had contributed massively to them up front. And they just seemed to lose momentum. And as happens, Beha got a foothold in the game and they just kept driving forward, kept driving forward. I think they'll have regrets that maybe they didn't get into the game a lot sooner, but Kinvara are a fine side, obviously beaten in the final last year, Conor Whelan up front, but really a quality team, a lot of really, really good hurlers. So I wasn't surprised that Kinvara won the game. I think they're a super team. I think Beha will be massively disappointed that they didn't turn up for more than 10 minutes and really put it up to Kinvara because for long periods they were always chasing the game, but when they did pull their socks up and went at it, they asked serious questions.
Yeah, even looking at some of the Kinvara scores, Dara Hurlibert 7 points, 4 frees, Luca Danju 1-2, Conor Whelan 3 points, Pádraig Canole 4, Aidan O'Hanlon 3, and on the better side of things, Adrian Toohey 1-5, Dahi Kane 6 points, Evan Hunt 4 points. John Kinvara obviously keen to get back on top here and intermediate just after coming up short to Teen Aberdeen in last year's final.
Absolutely, as Joe said, like the pain of that, I'm sure is still lingering. It'll be used quite a lot in the build. It's great prospect of this intermediate final with Mealy
Yeah.
Court as well. And it'll be interesting to see. That's on in Athenry on the Sunday
Yeah.
afternoon, the day after the senior final, and it'll be interesting to see what sort of crowd is there relative to the senior actually, yeah, because both of them are going to bring a huge following in it with so much happening, and there's so much happening in Kinvara at the moment anyway, with football success and everything. It's up to the hurlers now to deliver it in it, and to see to have somebody like Conor Whelan, you know, fired in an attack like that. But like Severa Court as well, like John Fleming, a few of these, like they're going to be serious contenders as well in it. But that'll be a good match. That'll be a good match actually. That we'll get our day out in that tonight yet.
Just on it, John, Meath Aircourt have obviously been thereabouts over the last few years in the competition, but in fairness, this year they've really gathered momentum. They beat Carramore quite convincingly in the quarter final, even against Ballygare at the weekend. Ballygare were leading 117 to 111 on 45 minutes. Meath Aircourt hit an unanswered 1-7 and hang on for a 218 to 118 victory.
Yeah, and it's an absolute credit to them as well because they're there since they're there since the year dot in Galway Hurling and Galway GA. And I passed through it a lot. My wife's from Banagher and Offaly, so I'd be familiar with Aircourt and all that. And you know, we spoke about Crockwell earlier. Crockwell has benefited from an awful lot of new houses coming into that area. Indeed, housing estates in Crockwell, as it was a lot of the others. But Aircourt is a bit like, would say Thomas's. The population hasn't increased much over the years, certainly not relative to any of the others. And yet they always field, they're always contenders. Like they've a big tradition, not based on huge success. But yet turnout time and time again with them. And as you said here, they've got a rally going again this year. They're never too far off it in intermediate, and here they are in a final as well. And they'll bring a huge crowd. They'll bring everyone from that side of the country up with them into it, and they'll give Kinvara a right rattle for it as well. But I'm a huge admirer of clubs like that can keep it going, and not just keep it going, but be contenders as well into the bargain. It's to their credit.
Joe, I actually went over to your own game against Loughrea Court in Loughrea this year, and I came away very impressed with them. But since then, they've just seemed to be getting better and better and bringing a new level each day. And even the last day, I thought even Ballygar looked like one of the form teams, but to come strong, I suppose in the end of that quarter, it's a really impressive trait.
Yeah, I think their big thing is that they have forwards that can score. They have six forwards that can score that are comfortable on the ball. John Fleming is an exceptional hurler who's stepped up and taken the responsibility on his shoulders. Niall, his brother, another exceptional hurler playing in the middle of the pitch. And they're a talented bunch. Nathan Erner up front. Guthrie, like they're good hurlers. But I agree with you. Since the group stages, they put Carmore to the sword very easily, and even the last day, like being that was some, they were down 6 points, that was a big with 15 minutes to go or whatever it was. That was just a tough Ballygar team who were physically very strong, good hurlers, to claw that back and to win the game, like that'll stand to them no end, because I think they had probably been comfortable in most games. I think they drew which Gahan and Montbelly in the group, but they had been comfortable in the rest of the games. They beat Athenry, they beat Cylon, beat Carmore well. So this was a game that had to come from behind it, so no doubt that'll stand to them in a final. They won't fear anyone for sure. And John said that they've been knocking around, the semi-finals, finals for the last 5, 6 years even. So I think maybe they'll have a lot of experience as well, no more than Kinvara from the final last year. And that's a game I certainly look forward to watching, because I think it'll be an even contest. I think both teams will fancy their chances, and rightly so. And it'll be one to savour.
Yes, they meet in Kenny Park November 2nd at 2 o'clock, and the curtain raiser then the Junior 1 final between Kiltormer and Ballinasloe at 12. The winner of that will still be a junior club next year, but they'll go forward to represent Galway at Connacht level in junior, and it's the same with Kinvara and Meath Court. They've secured the Premier Intermediate status. They'll go forward into the Connacht Intermediate Championship, the winner of that. But they'll be a Premier Intermediate team next year. But that is all we do have time for on today's show. Thanks to Joe and John for coming on to this week's podcast.